Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. Before we get started with this video, I just want to say that if you don't watch this video, then you're a terrible human being. You're holding back the human race. Your degeneracy and immoral attitude towards life is ultimately ruining society. And it's people like you that make life way more difficult than it needs to be for the rest of us, the good people out here in the world, who are just going about our business, being real, and so on and so forth. Wait a second. All of the things I just said were complete horseshit. It was my attempt to emotionally manipulate or blackmail you into watching this video. That's because that is the theme of the video. And if you watch it, you're going to become more aware of all of the emotional manipulation going on in the world, in your life. And more importantly, I'm going to help you to become immune to it by giving you an inoculation, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, so that you can stop buying into all that bullshit, stop being manipulated, and live a real life without unnecessary drama and nonsense. So before we get into the heavier stuff, let's begin with a really simple definition of what we mean by emotional manipulation and or blackmail, which are basically the same thing. It's any instance of somebody else trying to make you take responsibility for their feelings, their choices, their expectations and ideas by turning your feelings against you. Normally, it's going to be fear and guilt and shame, and they will control you by usually creating some unreal standard of how you should behave, of how you should be, how you should feel even. And if you don't act according to that standard, which is just something that they pulled out of their ass so that they can maintain their ego and not have to change or grow in life, if you don't live according to that standard, then they're going to put you on a guilt trip, they're going to punish you, they're going to basically make your life a living hell because they want you to take their feelings as your own and be responsible for them, when actually that is total nonsense, because at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our own feelings. And if there's something inside you that makes you take on board that responsibility, then you're going to get caught up in the cycle of being emotionally manipulated. And if you want to put an end to that, you need to ask yourself why you're buying into it. That's what we're about to do. So in this video, we're really just going to explore why you would accept that responsibility for somebody else's feelings, choices, and why you would live up or try to live up to their unrealistic standards that they have just created in order to control you in the first place, so that they can stay the same and they can watch you dance through hoops and do a whole song and dance trying to please them so they can feel powerful. And ultimately, that's what this is all about. It's a power dynamic. And the only way that you end up giving away your power is by getting detached from your own realness, your own truth about yourself, and starting to believe some unreal nonsense that can only really belong to your ego. And so if you can step back from your own ego stuff and you can start to see clearly, then you're ultimately going to be able to stop feeding into other people's egos, and that is going to allow the whole house of cards to fall down. The only reason that emotional manipulation works is because at some level, you're choosing to be manipulated. And normally, that's just so you don't have to feel uncomfortable. It's so you can feel the familiar buzz of being who you currently think you are. But if you are being manipulated, then that is unreal. And so what you need to do, flip the script, start being real again, and you get your power back and you remove the power over whoever it is in your life that's manipulating you with all of this bullshit. Now, the bottom line for the record is that nobody is responsible for their own feelings apart from themselves, their own feelings and their own choices, except maybe in extreme cases. If somebody's holding a gun to your head, maybe they can coerce you and make you choose something that you don't want. But on a day-to-day basis, we are all responsible for our own feelings and our own choices. And that means that anytime somebody tries to pass that ownership onto you, instead of owning their own feelings and choices, you have a choice to make. You can either stop it in its tracks, or you can try and take it because of your own ego stuff, and you need to feel approval or love or whatever it is that you think you're going to get by taking this on board. And in that moment where you can make that choice, that is where you have the opportunity to step into your power. Accepting this fact of our life, that we're all responsible for our own choices and our own feelings, doesn't mean that we should go around purposely trying to piss people off and upsetting them. It just means that if we've been real and we're going about our lives the best way that we can, chasing our values and our true intentions and all that kind of stuff, we probably will piss people off along the way. But as long as we're not doing that intentionally, we don't have to fall into the trap of being controlled when people are upset with us being on a real path whilst they're getting worked up over something unreal in their minds. So I'm putting that out there because even though we're not responsible for other people's feelings, we don't need to purposely annoy people. But at the same time, we don't need to get so worked up and upset if we do upset somebody that we allow ourselves to be manipulated. So now I'm going to give you 3 examples of the most common types of emotional manipulation. And once you're aware of these, you're going to see it all over the place. And this is because a lot of people are coming at life from the ego, from a place of ego, and they don't even know that they're manipulating other people. It's just a survival mechanism that they've picked up to be able to cope in life and to get the results that they want, basically. And so a lot of the time, it's automatic. It's not like people are just evil or anything like that. It's just something that they do because they've always done it. But anyway, as we already said, emotional manipulation is basically when people try and make you own things that aren't yours, feelings and choices, or when they try and get you to be something that you're not and that you can never be. Because what they're asking you to be is some unreal thing that they've concocted because of their own ego stuff and their desire to keep the ego where it is and to not have to face their own stuff and grow real. So here's the 3 examples. So the first example of emotional manipulation is the feelings thing. It shows up like this. Somebody will say to you, if you don't watch this YouTube video, if you don't walk my dog, if you don't blah, 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 I'm going to be really upset. I'm going to be really angry. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to jump off a bridge. Whatever it is, that is their attempt to persuade you that you are responsible for their feelings and what they do with those feelings. Now, if you're the kind of person who has been conditioned to please everybody, you're a people pleaser or a nice guy, whatever you want to call it, that is going to work on you because the most horrifying thing that you can imagine is making somebody feel negative emotions. But actually, if you put yourself in the position of being responsible for this person's feelings, and even worse, showing them that you will take responsibility by walking their dog or watching their YouTube videos so they don't jump off a bridge, etc., then you're actually showing them that they can control you in that way. And so that type of manipulation is everywhere. It comes from our parents sometimes, it comes from our siblings, it comes from our friends. But at the end of the day, you are not responsible for anybody's feelings. And so even if they do get upset, even if they are angry, if they jump off a bridge, you probably want to avoid having that happen. But either way, even if they do jump off a bridge, it is not because you didn't want their dog or whatever. It's because they, at some level, just wanted to do that, which I know sounds really harsh. The point is, you are not responsible for their feelings. And if they try and make you feel that way, well, you just can't manipulate it. The second example of how manipulation shows up is around choices. And it's where somebody makes a choice that is maybe not the best choice. And instead of taking responsibility for it, they try and find a way to blame you. So maybe, for example, you go for lunch with a friend and they're on a diet or whatever it is. And during the lunch, they end up just eating loads of calories, whatever it is, and going away from their diet plan, whatever it is that they're on. And then after the meal, they start blaming you. Oh my God, I can't believe you let me order that on the menu, like, you know, I'm on a diet and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you got another friend who is trying not to drink alcohol and you go out and they have a few pints, and then the next day, well, it's your fault because you let it happen. Now, maybe you could have tried to talk them out of it if you so desired, but ultimately, that choice was theirs. And as soon as you let them put you on a guilt trip for the choice that they made, well, again, you've become manipulated. And as soon as you start kind of trying to pacify them or put an argument forward as to why, you let it happen, or why, you wish you didn't let it happen, or you show that you feel bad about it or whatever, well, congratulations, you've just been manipulated again. The third form of this kind of emotional manipulation is sometimes quite subtle, but it's also very common, and it happens all over the place. And I'll give some examples of where it does in a second. But basically, this is the kind of manipulation I keep talking about, where somebody pulls an unrealistic standard out of their ass, and then they use that standard against you, even though it's just something that they concocted because of their own ego, and they try and use it as a sort of box that they want you to live in so that they can stay the same. And ultimately, it's a kind of control freakery. They are control freaks because they are filtering life through the ego, and the only way that their ego can maintain its hold over them is if you do voluntarily put yourself in this kind of a box so that they can stay in their comfort zone. And ultimately, the way that this box takes shape is that it's about asking you to be something that you're not. And 3 really common examples or areas where this happens are in relationships, friendships, and at work. So for example, in relationships, your partner might say, right, if you don't remember every single little detail of my life, then you don't love me. And ultimately, that's impossible because nobody can remember every single little detail of somebody's life, and it has nothing to do with love. But as soon as you buy into that, well, you're putting yourself up for all kinds of guilt trips. They're going to control you. They're going to say, well, because you don't remember every little detail of my life and you don't love me, you're going to have to walk my dog, and you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that. It's all bullshit. In friendships, they might say something like, if you don't lend me £1,000, whatever, you're not a real friend. And the box ultimately is shaped by this definition of a real friend. And that's what all of these kind of things are about in relation to how you should be. They create a label that is ultimately a mask for all kinds of bullshit that you can never live up to. That's the whole point. You're not supposed to be able to live up to it, because if you can, they're not going to have anything to moan about and manipulate you with. But anyway, so in the friendship thing, it's things like that. If you don't, if you don't call me every night and listen to me talk about all my problems nonstop, you're not a real friend. If you don't drop all of your plans, you're not a real friend. Basically, the box is the idea of a real friend, and they can come up with all kinds of highfalutin ideas about what it means to live in that box. But actually, you don't want to live in the box. That's the whole point. You want to get out of it. The third example here is at work. Your boss might say, if you don't work on a Saturday, then you're not going to get that promotion. You're not a good employee. If you don't stay and do overtime, even though it's not in your contract, then you obviously don't care about this place and you're not part of the family here in the workplace, and blah, 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 blah. It's all nonsense. They're saying that you should be a certain thing so that you can live up to their standards. And as soon as you try to be whatever that is, instead of realizing that it's just pure nonsense and refusing to feed into it, then you've been manipulated. In all of these cases, emotional manipulation only works if you let it. And whether it's about taking responsibility for their feelings, their choices, or trying to live up to being some unreal standard just so that their ego can maintain its hold over them, the solution in all cases is the same. And it's very simple, and it's simply to not feed into that with your own ego. The only reason you'd buy into that kind of manipulation is because your ego is causing you to believe something unreal. And so the solution, as always, because this channel is about being real, is to step back, find your realness, and to ground yourself in something true. And as soon as you do that, you are not pouring gasoline on the fire by allowing your ego to meet their ego. Now, sometimes if you resist, In fact, often if you resist, the next level after the initial manipulation is that they're going to try and punish you. They might make threats. They might give you the silent treatment. They might call you all kinds of names. They might constantly put you on a guilt trip and try to make you feel bad. We could make a whole video that would last hours and hours and hours about the kind of punishment that these manipulators are going to try and enforce upon you if you don't buy into the manipulation. But in all cases, the solution is the same. And it's simply to just not feed into it. As soon as somebody gives you the silent treatment, for example, and you start chasing after them and trying to, beseech them and get down on your knees and beg that they start talking to you again, you have shown them that the manipulation is working. And so actually, any attempts to appease them by giving them what they want is only going to make the situation worse. And that's the next part of this video, showing you how by being real, you can immunize yourself. Is that even the words? You can make yourself immune. You can give yourself an immunization to the emotional manipulation by not feeding it. Do not feed the gremlin. That is the next lesson. So the solution to emotional manipulation is to find your realness again. And I know that sounds simplistic, but the only way that you can be manipulated is because you had a moment of being unreal that taught whoever is manipulating you how to press your buttons. And if you have a button that can be pressed, it simply means that you have some unresolved shame or guilt or even trauma, ill feelings around something that whenever it's pressed, then you're going to respond in an unreal way. Because every time that button is pressed, it's ultimately just causing your emotions to send your ego kicking into gear. And then you're going to feed into the dance between you and the manipulator where, you're in this kind of power battle for being responsible for their feelings, their choices, and being whatever it is that they say you should be so that they can finally approve of you and make you feel good. When naturally, you can feel good about yourself anyway without them giving you the approval and validation and all that kind of stuff. And so what I'm saying is that you need to take the power back by realizing that the only person who can press your buttons is you. And you can only do that by facing the underlying emotional stuff that is causing those buttons to be pressable in the first place. And there are a few strategies here that can help you in relation to these emotional manipulators. They're all very simple. The overarching strategy is what I've already said. Don't feed into it. If you realize that somebody is emotionally manipulating you, then the best thing to do is to ignore them. If somebody is giving you the silent treatment, ignore them. They'll come back. Let them go off and be silent and brood and do whatever it is that they're doing. Don't chase after them. That's the worst thing you can do. If somebody is giving you the whole spiel about how if you don't do a certain thing, then you're not a good friend or a good lover or a good employee or whatever else, let them think that. So be it. Okay, I'm not a good lover. I'm not a good friend. I'm not a good employee. Oh my God, the world is going to crumble around me. Not. Because the standard that they're holding you accountable to is not real. And so ultimately, that is always the best policy. Just ignore them. Let them get on with it. That will show you that they actually have no power. Because by ignoring it, you're kind of going to flip the script. Because if they really do care about you, deep down, they're going to have to come back to you and change the whole dynamic of the relationship by communicating in a different way. So that's the ultimate way to avoid the manipulation. Just ignore it. If you've got some ego stuff going on, that's going to be hard. You're going to have a little voice in your head saying, oh my God, I can't believe I'm ignoring this person. I'm a bad person. Or you'll have another niggling voice saying, oh my God, what if I am a bad lover? What if I am a bad friend? No, that voice is your conditioning. It's the ego. If you're coming from a place of wholeness and you care about that person and you're there for them, but you still care about yourself and your own life, that doesn't make you a bad anything. You're a human being. And there's no point trying to live up to these bullshit standards that people create so that they can manipulate you for their own nefarious reasons. The other two things that you can do are, one, You can just say no. Set the boundaries. Boundaries begins by saying no. You might have to say it a few times. There's a famous technique in assertiveness training called the broken record technique, where you literally just say the same line every time. So if somebody says to you, for example, go walk my dog, or I'm going to jump off a bridge, you can say, well, look, I really don't want you to jump off a bridge because I love you and I care about you, but I'm not going to walk your dog right now because I have to go focus on my own thing and do some yoga or whatever it is. Then they'll come back at you. Oh, you don't love me, blah, blah, blah. You want me to jump off a bridge. You just say the same thing. Well, actually, I really don't want you to jump off a bridge because I really love you and I think you're an amazing person, but I have to go do this other thing right now. Sorry about that. The other thing you can do is to remember the super ultimate mantra that comes into play in all relationships, which is simply this: give me something real or GTFO. If somebody is only ever manipulating you and your attempts to not buy into it or to set boundaries doesn't work, then you're actually allowed to just walk away. And maybe when you do walk away, they'll reflect and they'll realize that they need to change their way of doing things. Or maybe you'll never see them again. But it's better to be alone than in unreal company. And if you know that and you have an abundance mindset, that means you can basically understand there are other opportunities out there and that you don't have to put up with this kind of treatment. Life gets way easier. So you can either ignore it and it will lose its power because you're not feeding into it. You can say no and set boundaries, which may make things worse depending on the person. Or 3, you can just GTFO and go find someone who actually appreciates you and isn't going to manipulate you. So I want to finish this video with 3 main reasons why people may not step into their realness and end this cycle of manipulation that they may have found themselves in. These are really common reasons, and if you understand them, it's going to give you that awareness to be able to make that choice, to step into something real and not keep going around in circles trying to please somebody who can never, ever be pleased. They don't want to be pleased. They want to manipulate you so they can feel powerful. And if you understand that, it's going to make it easier to step into your realness and be who you need to be. The first reason that stops a lot of people ending this cycle of emotional manipulation is that they have unresolved shame and guilt. If you have guilt especially, you're going to be really easy to control because guilt is ultimately just a useless case of some external voice infiltrating our brains and telling us that there's something wrong with us because we're not doing this, we're not doing that. And if you do have that guilt, then you're ultimately going to have buttons that can be pressed. And it's the same with shame. If you have feelings of worthlessness or that you're not good enough, it means that you don't accept yourself and that you're avoiding something inside your experience of who you are that is causing these buttons to be pressable in the first place. And so actually the solution is to face those unresolved emotions. Normally what happens when people face them, they just look at them head on, is they dissolve. It's the resistance that causes them to linger in the first place. And we resist them by hiding behind our own egos. And as soon as we take the ego out of the equation, we take a good long look at what's going on inside us, those buttons can no longer be pressed because the buttons mean that we're resisting something. And so if we turn inwards and we face the truth about who we are going to be way less likely to be manipulatable because people will press the buttons. But like I said earlier, the power of the button is in our hands. So that is the most important thing, actually. You can only be manipulated if your buttons can be pressed. Your buttons can only be pressed if you're resisting something. And so you can avoid all of this and stay grounded in your realness by understanding what's making those buttons pressable in the first place, finding ways to make it dissolve, which always means bringing the truth into our lives, allowing the unconscious to become conscious, and then you'll be free of your own inner fragmentation and free of the external fragmentation in the form of these relationships where you get manipulated because you've reclaimed your power. The second thing that stops people from staying real, being grounded in their realness in the face of these emotional manipulators and either ignoring what they're doing, so ignoring the silent treatment, for example, or walking away or setting a boundary, the thing that stops them doing that is a fear of conflict. They're worried that if they go back to being real, then the unreal person, in this situation, the emotional manipulator, is going to do something that the real person or the person trying to break the cycle can't tolerate. Or it's going to cause them to be in a situation where they feel lonely or they feel bad about themselves or whatever it is. That is actually just a sign that you don't have an abundance mindset. For example, if you're in a relationship and somebody is constantly manipulating you and you've tried to set the boundary or whatever it is, and you're ready to step up to actually call them out on it, but you're worried that they're going to end the relationship, well, if they do end the relationship, maybe that's for the best. Because why would you want to be in a relationship with someone that's manipulating you all the time, even after you set boundaries? It's the same with a friendship. If you have a friend who's always taking the piss and trying to send you on a guilt trip or whatever it is, if you call attention to it and they say, right, that's it, fuck you, I'm not your friend anymore, and they disappear, they've just done you a favor. The same with a job. Like, obviously jobs and our ability to pay the bills and stuff are intertwined. But at the end of the day, if you tell your boss that you're sick of this emotional manipulation and he says, right, that's it then, you're fired, well, he's just done you a favor as well. But if you have a scarcity mindset, you're not going to realize that you can go replace these things, whatever they are. And because you're probably replacing them with something better, well, it's nothing to worry about. It just means some short-term discomfort as you rearrange the fabric of your life and go from unreal to real. The third main reason that stops people from breaking the cycle of emotional manipulation by being real is that they actually have empathy and compassion for the person manipulating. Now, empathy and compassion, we all like those things, right? Like, it's very important to have them. But in this case of dealing with an emotional manipulator, empathy and compassion are actually your enemies. They just make the situation worse. And so if you start telling yourself a story like, this person is manipulating me because they had a difficult childhood, or, you know, they're going through a lot of stress at the moment, or whatever it is, you're actually making your life more difficult. Because by doing that, it's going to change, or thinking and feeling in that way, it's going to change your behavior towards the person, and you're going to cave into the manipulations. And so in a strange way, the empathy and compassion are just going to make you more easy to manipulate. What you need to do is understand that they are a human being. We can have sympathy for them and understand that, okay, life is difficult and blah, 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 blah. But we need to remember that you can't pour from an empty cup. And so if you're putting them before yourself in this situation, you're just going to keep being manipulated because you're showing them that you are going to submit to them, basically, and submit to the way that they are manipulating you. And the cycle's never going to end. And this doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you may have to be a little bit callous. Maybe callous is too strong of a word, but you need to be emotionally reserved so that you don't give into their ego stuff and whatever sob story comes with it and stuff like that. Because the moment that you do, you're giving your power over to them. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't be compassionate in life. It just means in this particular case, if you're compassionate towards someone that's manipulating you, you're just giving them permission to keep doing it. So that's ultimately all I need to say for now. Emotional manipulation is a power struggle. Power is the key word, because the only way that you can give away your power is by giving into illusions, which means that your ego is in control instead of your realness. And as soon as you do that, you meet the ego of the manipulator with your own ego because of your own unconscious shame and guilt and trauma and all these kind of things. Then you're just going to keep this cycle, this dance of emotional manipulation going. You can end the cycle anytime by just being real and not feeding into it. But to do that, you have to really be grounded in your realness, because the manipulator is going to challenge you. They're going to try and make things worse. They're going to push those buttons more and more and more. But if you just stay real and you stay grounded, it's almost impossible to be manipulated. And now you're aware of this. You know there's people trying to make you responsible for their feelings, their choices. They're trying to get you to be something you never can be. You're going to see this all over the place. And it's not just between people. You turn on the TV, someone's going to be manipulating. You're scrolling through your social media, some influencer is going to be trying to manipulate. It's everywhere. But no matter where you're experiencing this, it's always the same. You're either being unreal because your ego is feeding into it, or you've been real and you can just keep flowing and do your own thing without any of this bullshit holding you back, making you feel bad, or just getting in the way of living a real life and being who you really are, not who they're telling you to be. So that's the video. Hope it helped. If anybody wants to talk about this or any related issue, you can book a call on my website. But hope this helped. Like I just said, peace to you and stay real.